Awareness, compassion, wisdom, strength, and abundance. All right, so the basic idea here today is if you want to get the present, you got to open the box. So the idea will roll from here. Basically, it's been shown that people fear loss more than they value gain. So if we have the basics of life, this is true. But if we don't have the basics of life, then all bets are off, and people will get quite crazy when they have nothing. But in general, if you're more or less comfortable, you value, you protect against loss more than you value gain, which is a huge implication in the spiritual life, because spiritual life is about gain, and the conditioned ego life is kind of about protection against loss. So this is kind of where we start from. Now, if you're starving or desperate, of course, you're going to get a little bit nuts. But once your basic needs are fulfilled, it's assumed in the spiritual life anyway, whatever that is, that you can get on with it. So in a monastery in the East, in Asia, Japan, wherever, Thailand, wherever you go, the first thing that they ask you is, do you have enough to eat? And if you say yes, and do you have a roof over your head? You go, yes. Are you basically healthy? I mean, can you function? Yes. Okay. So now they assume that if you have the basics taken care of, that you can get on with the practice. And that's kind of a fairly big assumption, because the point they kind of miss in this one is that people prefer more to less. And the more, the better. So this pursuit of more, right, is kind of what drives a lot of our lives. And so this up more thing, for maybe perhaps for women, right, the more thing kind of runs on an upgrade motif. So guys want more golf clubs and more cars, and women tend to see it as an improved status or improved grade of stuff. So the upgrade motif runs through consciousness either for guys or for women, slightly different way. So upgrade, more, and that kind of drives the whole story. So in that process, we always look for the best, don't we? You see this in kind of group situations, where as a Dharma teacher, mostly in the Vajrayana tradition, but as a Dharma teacher, we sometimes have dormitory situations where people are staying, and you can always tell, you can predict it, you can pay money on it. Even Dharma practitioners, if you put a person in the dorm room, which bed are they going to take? The best one. And if you go to a restaurant, which chair are you going to take? The best one. And if you could choose your seat on the plane, where would you sit? In the best one. So there's this tendency in the human consciousness to choose what's best, or the best possible option that's available. To choose the best is smart. It's just intelligent, you know. Get the best you can get. But then what happens is, if you combine it with the idea of more, you end up spending your entire life chasing more and best and more, and that can, you know, occupy your world. But in that process, right, there's kind of a law of diminishing returns, isn't there? That the more gets sort of more, but it gradually gets not as good as the first more. Does that make sense? Maybe an example of that is popcorn. I don't know, in America, if you go to a movie, you got to have popcorn. I go to movies in America, Canada, for the popcorn, right? But you ever eat one kernel of popcorn and then put the bag away, you're done? Or, you know, maybe one cookie? Or you ladies with chocolate, you know, you just one little piece of chocolate and you're done? I don't think so, no. It doesn't happen that way. Or maybe sex, you know, you had sex once, somebody here had sex once? Maybe you had sex once? That's enough? Okay, I'm done. I had sex once. Finished with that. No, this nature of desire that isn't really seen so much is that desire can be satisfied. You ate the popcorn, you had the chocolate, you got the best seat in the house, but it can't be satiated. You understand the difference? That you can satisfy a desire in the moment, but it doesn't go away. We assume that if you had sex once, that you're done. You're never going to do that again. No, I don't think so. Right? You're probably going to come back to it tomorrow or the next day, and same thing for the popcorn, and probably for the chocolate bar and the crisps and the chips, so on. So this idea that desire can be satisfied but it can't be satiated, kind of gives us the feeling that something's being missed in here. And there's a law of diminishing returns, right? The law of diminishing returns is that, well, let's take the popcorn, for example. The first 5 or 10 kernels taste what? Fantastic. The next 5 or 10 kernels taste pretty good, and the next 5 or 10 kernels taste okay. And by the time you get to the, you guys probably don't do this here, but like in America, you know, popcorn bags are about like this, by like this, by like this. And in some movie theaters, you can actually go back and get them refilled. Kind of scary thinking about it, really. Anyone's involved in more. And there's a law of diminishing returns rooted in desire as well. The idea that you got to keep coming back to it over and over. And so the law of diminishing returns tells us that a lot of our desires get habitualized, don't they? I mean, we when we go to the movie, we have the popcorn. When we go to the restaurant, we have the dessert, whatever it is. So this habitualization of desire, the habitualization of our choices, puts us back over and over again into the same groove, right? We keep making similar choices for similar reasons about similar things, right? And so there's this kind of sense that while we're satisfying, am I moving too much? If we satisfy the desire and it can't be satiated, we either have to go to more, right? Or we kind of get feeling somewhat a little empty. You know? Something's being missed, right? And it's that key ingredient that something's being missed that drives the spiritual search. Yes, it's good. I love the popcorn. I love the chocolate. I did get the best seat occasionally. Occasionally I got the best bed, right? I did occasionally get the best seat in the restaurant. The food was occasionally measured my expectations, right? But there's still that feeling that something's being missed in the process. Also, excuse me. Also, because desire is habituated and because our choices are habituated, right? We learn them from where? We learn them from mommy and daddy. We learn them from our school. We learn them from our culture. We learn them from our religion. And so they become patternized. They become operantly conditioned, as they say. And so we keep making the same choices because we've been habituated, but also because we're dependent creatures when we're small. When we're 2, we are completely dependent on our caregivers. So there's a survival motif that goes into this as well, right? That if I make a different choice or if I make an alternative choice, I may be abandoned, I may be pushed out, I may be unloved. So the habituation of desire and the habituation of our choices kind of puts us into a coma. Now, coma may seem like a strong word, so we can change it to just a kind of a walking sleep. So the nature of habituated patterns and habituated desires and habituated behavior basically makes us unconscious. That's a little hard to believe. You think you're conscious right now, don't you? And insofar as you're hearing something different than what you normally hear when you're going about things, you are conscious. But have you ever, do some of you drive cars? Have you ever driven a car across Wales and not seeing anything? Because you're talking to your girlfriend in the next seat about something and you've gone right by it all. Or a story I like to tell is about a friend of mine who was a sleepwalker. And he would get up and he would go into the kitchen, he'd make himself bacon and eggs, right? Boil water, make coffee, and wake up eating it. Without any damage to himself or the stove or the kitchen or anything else. He was doing it completely on the basis of habituation. And so most of what we do, insofar as it's a habit that you just run, you're not actually conscious in that moment. Now what happens is little things come in and they kick you out of the unconscious, well, you're conscious but unaware behavior just for a moment. And so you're conscious, so you're aware, habituated, aware, habituated on an ongoing pattern through the day. This also gives us the feeling that something's being missed. And it also causes us to behave. Because if we don't behave, we're abandoned, we're unloved, we're not there. So this is a huge motif. This cultural social conditioning puts us in the box. We're getting to the box idea, right? The conditioning runs over and over again. And so when we become teenagers, we rebel, right? On every good teenager, you've been a teenager, I assume. Every good teenager rebels, and I assume you think you rebelled, right? Everybody rebelled? No? Nobody in England rebelled? I think? Yeah, there we go. So, but the rebellion problem is that you don't have an ego till you're 2. So it's not until 2 that the cultural operant conditioning is even recognized as conditioning. So what happens is that between 2 and 32, right, your rebellion starts what, 16, 15, pubescent, somewhere in there maybe, right? So you rebel in order to separate from your family, but you're not actually rebelling from yourself. In order to rebel from yourself, you got to get down to 10, 8, 9, 7, 6, and that's hard to do because most of those memories are kind of lost into the collective unconscious, of Jung's collective unconscious, right? So the nature of therapy is it can only take you down to 2, because therapy assumes that the ego, the self, is real, is a real and inherent thing. So you can only rebel to 2. To go past 2, you need a different tool, and the different tool is the meditative mind. The meditative mind can take you pre-2, but in the process of getting pre-2, you're also pre-you. Right? You're no longer you. You showed up at 2. My mother tells me that I was a perfect baby until I was 2. That's because I wasn't there. So what's the first word out of your mouth? Mommy. And the second word maybe daddy. And then the third word is no. And the reason little 2-year-olds say no is because they're learning not to be mommy and daddy. It's they're individuating. So the therapeutic model can take you down to 2, but it's the meditative model that takes you not only pre-2, but back through the womb experience. You can relive the womb experience through the 4 stages of the womb, out the other side into the whatever you want to call that. And curiously enough, the same thing happens at death. At death, the ego falls away, as it does in sleep, and you can go out the other way. You can go out the death end, and you can go, it's post-you, but still conscious, and eventually that circle completes itself. So there's kind of not you, not you, not you, born, not you, 2 to 80 you, 80 going by you, gone you, and then the full circle goes around. And there are beings who have purportedly made that complete journey. They go from birth to death to birth consciously. For a minute to the idea of more, the problem is because of the nature of 2 and 80, let's say you live from 2 to 80, and all of your habits and all of your desires are structured within that 2 to 80 group, right? The fundamental nature of your program is unreliable. It's not a sustainable program for well-beingness at an absolute level. It's perfectly fine at a relative level, but that thing that you're missing, right? However you frame it, insofar as you feel there's something missing, and I don't think you'd be here if you didn't feel there's something missing, which is what you sort of come to hope to discover, whether it's me or whoever. The thing that you're missing isn't you. In fact, the thing that you're missing isn't in the habitual patterns. It isn't in the programming. It's between the gaps. It's in that non-you bit. Okay. So because of this insecurity, right, of the ego, it runs into 4 huge fears. There are any number of ways of labeling these, and there's the fears of the womb, which I won't get into, and there's other fears, but I'm going to call them what I call the 4 root fears, and they are abandonment. So the ego is terrified of abandonment, right? Annihilation. The ego is feared of being wiped out. Insanity. The fear is the ego is afraid of being insanity. What's the 4th? Oh, and being evil, right? And the ego is always terrified of being evil, bad, right? Because of course the ego is frustrated, right, by its lack of absolute control. Does that make sense? Because the ego never feels its control, right? It kind of has a temper tantrum. It has a temper tantrum in face of what's missing, And that temper tantrum, you feel that if you let go of your egos, you're controlled. All those people that you wanted to smack and kill and shoot and beat up and whatever you're going to do them, you just get out there and you do it, right? So the ego's afraid of doing that, so it hangs on tight to its control so it doesn't do anything bad. It's important to note here that it's not the ego that lets go that does anything crazy. It's the ego that's too tight. The ego that's too fragile is the ego that does bad things. The ego that can let go has no motivation to do anything bad. There's no motivation in it. There's no need. So it's very particular that these big four fears, right, are of the ego. They're not of the being. That's hugely important. Your being doesn't have any fear. Only the ego has fear. Your being doesn't experience abandonment or loneliness. Your ego experiences abandonment or loneliness. And what did I miss? Annihilation. Your ego isn't annihilated with spiritual realization. It's just kind of temporary irrelevant. Does that make sense? Now that's absolute truth. But absolute truth says nothing about relative truth. Relative truth, you got to go to work, you got to pay your bills, blah, 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 blah. So on that sense, we don't have a lot to say about relative truth that isn't contained in getting a better degree, get some training, go to therapy, all that stuff. Great. That helps you on a relative organizational end. But from the point of view of what you feel that's missing, and this is kind of the key point from where I'm sitting and where most of these people are sitting, right, is that the only place to access what is missing is the not you. How do you access the not you? Well, the not you means you have to go past your stories. You have to go past, in other words, you have to go past all the things that are connected to relative truth. Relationship, abandonment, control and power issues, annihilation, anger and ill will and emotional conflict, doing bad things, right? And the idea that basically if I let go, I'm going to go crazy. Insanity. So in the process of meeting these four fears and realizing that they're in the ego and letting go of them, right, which you can't do from the ego position. Does that make sense? So if you can't let go of them from the ego position, how do you let go of them? You choose to recognize the ego that is present and look for what's missed. Does that make sense? So if you're looking for what's missed, how do you know what it is? Well, it's in the gap. It's in the gap between this and this. Example is that you're all looking at me, right? So anybody, what do you see? Just anyone? A what? A purple sweater. You see a purple sweater. You see glasses. You see brown hair. You see handsome, debonair, suave, and humble. Did I mention humble? But what you don't see is the distance between your nose and my nose, right? The space. You don't see the space because you're not looking for it. So same thing in meditation is if I'm looking at this lady in purple and I'm focusing on she's Asian and etc. All these kind of ways that the ego positions, but I'm not looking at the distance between her nose and my nose because there's nothing in it for the ego. There's no ego payoff. It isn't going to get me a better job. It isn't going to get me more. And so we miss the space. We miss the gap, right? Because it doesn't relate to the ego's desires. And so all we have to do is learn to look into the space in order to see what we missed. What we missed is actually the space itself. Does that make sense? It's got to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, it's just gobbledygook. So, we're almost there. The happiness that you're seeking in ego gratification is 2 to 80. The happiness that you're looking in terms of transcendence or spiritual realization is pre-2 and post-80. It's in the gap, it's in the space, it's in the not you. Does that make sense? So your process of your spiritual life is really accessing that space that is not you. So in that sense, the ego, 2, through the practice of meditation and other things, the challenges, we have a thing called the challenges which shake your sense of you. So if you want to become not you, what's easier, becoming a different you, which is rooted in that 2 to 80 thing, or becoming, or entering and dwelling in the space? Well, I think for most people it's much easier to become a different you than to become a not you. So the argumentation is, okay, so I'm Doug Duncan, I'm from Western Canada, and I grew up playing hockey badly, and then I moved to Ottawa, I got a university degree, blah, blah, ended up in Japan, blah, 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 ended up in Tibet, blah, 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 blah. And so each of those is kind of a different you. Does that make sense? So the argumentation is, the first thing you need to do in the spiritual life is become not you. So what we're going to suggest is, tomorrow, you do one thing different out of the box that you didn't do today. So if you don't wear makeup, put makeup on. If you never wear dresses, wear a dress. If you never wear pants, wear pants. If you only put on a shirt and tie, if you never wear a shirt and tie, don't wear a shirt and tie. If you do wear a shirt and tie, the argumentation is that in the process of becoming other, you approach non-you. Does that make sense? This is me, not me, not me, not me, me, not me, not me, not me, me, not me, not me, not me, not me. And in the process of gradually not being you regularly, you find out there is no you that's really, truly you. There's just a bunch of made up yous, and that reveals not you. Okay? It's easy to do, money back guaranteed, and we'll throw in as well a robe so you can look spiritual. I have a prairie sense of humor, so it's a cart and horse argument, really. The ego is the cart, the not you is the horse. In our daily lives, we have the cart in front of the horse. We go from morning till night, me. I like this, I don't like that, I want this, I don't want that, I want to go here, I don't want to go there, I want coffee nut latte, tea nut, all day long, right? From the moment you get up to the moment you get to bed, me, 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 me. Even if it's your kids, it's my kids go to school, my kids this, right? So the argumentation is that if the ego is the cart and the awakened mind is the horse, right? Then the not you is the horse, and the you is the cart. We want to switch the order. We're not trying to destroy the cart. We just want to put the horse in front of the cart. And we put the horse in front of the cart, then the transcendental not you leads the you. Now, what happens if the cart's in front of the horse? Where does the cart go? Nowhere, and in circles. And that's most people's 2 to 80-year-old lives. They're not bad. They're just same old, same old. And if you get out of one marriage, yeah, good luck. You get out of one marriage, you get into another. They're pretty much the same. All guys are the same. Just pick one you can get along with, right? So it's like you're just going around in circles. But if you put the horse in front of the cart, right, then that horse, which has no inherent program of its own, once the horse is in front of the cart, you still get the ego gets the reins. You know, but the thing is, the ego doesn't need to lead a trained horse. The horse ends up taking you where you want to go anyway. So it's like an old drunk. The ego's kind of drunk in his cart, and the horse is going home. And what do you have to do? You old drunk on the cart, you. Just don't fall off the cart. And you do that by sort of just staying awake enough to stay on the cart and make sure you got your eyes on the horse and everything's cool. All right. So in the fire sermon, right, the Buddha, you thought we'd get there eventually, right? In the fire sermon, the Buddha said was like outside, and all the people were inside in the house playing with their toys. You know, their plasma TV and their jobs and their careers and their relationships and the kids and their emotions and their feelings and all that stuff, right? And the Buddha was out there saying, hey guys, you know, get out here with the horse, because the Buddha was outside, which is the metaphor for the horse. Are you following my argument? Right? And he said, okay, come on, let's go, come on out. You know, you're in a burning house, you're going to die at 80, all that shit's gone. I mean, seriously, you know that, right? Everything you got's gone. It's gone. You're not taking anything with you. Not even you. right? So like, how about coming outside where you get the full circle? You just don't get this little arc between like crisps and chocolate. You also get Morocco. Anyway, the metaphor has problems. But nobody would come out, right? People weren't coming out. So, you know, using homeopathic medicine, right? The Buddha used the poison as a cure, right? So he said, okay, hey, I got this great stuff out here. I mean, really good stuff. I don't just have any old husband, I have Brad Pitt. I don't have any old wife, I've got Angelina Jolie. You get the idea. This is a metaphor, right? Right? So the people would come out, and that's the metaphor of if you don't open the box, you don't get the present. The 2 to 80-year-old you ego card thing is the box. In order to open the box, you get the present. To open the box, you have to find not self, non-you. Right? It's not non-you in the sense of destruction, it's not you in the sense of other. And in that process of finding non-you, you find the horse. Because you're not only not all these others, you're not really inherently anything, which allows you on a relative truth to be in your cart and live your life, and on an absolute truth, you're non-self, you're spacious, you're clear, you're radiant, you're in awake, because that state can't be disturbed by objects. Sorry for the noise. Is that clear? From the point of view of the horse, you can't have any problems. From the point of view of the cart, you're a little screwed. Because it's nothing but problems, right? Into every life, trauma will and does fall. Present is the empty box, right? The ego is the box. And the opportunity is that when you come out of the box, as it were, not only do you get the non-ego, bliss, clarity, non-clinging, awareness, transcendent, radiance, blah, 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 you also get to be an ego. Cool. You get your cake, and you get to eat it too. And you get the much better cake, because, you know, you've got all those not yous, you know, those other yous. So I get her best cake, and I get her best cake, and her best cake, and her best cake, and his best cake. The question is not you to do something that is not normally you? Yes, and I call this the 4 challenges, or sorry, the 3 challenges. And they're deepening. You don't have to do any spiritual work, period, because there isn't any, right? It's mostly just ego work with a difference. But if you do the challenge, meditation's important because it allows you to integrate the discoveries that happen in a not you position, and then you integrate those into your ego structure so that you can keep the not you and the you. So I've introduced something that I think cuts people's work hugely, and I call it the 3 challenges. I'm going to start with the hardest one first, the yearly challenge. The yearly challenge is big. It's colossal. It's scary. You don't want to do it. It scares the shit out of you, and you're terrified of it. Jumping out of an airplane. Scuba diving, you know? Something that's just really, you got to really, and it's a one-off. You do it one day in the whole year, and you're done. But it's big. There's only one rule. It can't be destructive to property, and it can't be dangerous to life. But it can be kind of dangerous to life. Like jumping on an airplane is kind of dangerous, you know? But you're probably more likely going to get killed in a car accident than you are jumping out of an airplane. I mean, statistically, right? So that's the yearly challenge. The monthly challenge is something, once a month, one day, is something that you always felt you wanted to do, but you never got around to. Like, I just never got to that. So that's the second hardest challenge. The hardest challenge is the weekly challenge. Now, the weekly challenge is one day, do something you don't normally do. How many people have coffee every morning or every day? So let's say, for argument's sake, that Friday is your challenge day. Okay, Friday, no coffee. Saturday, coffee. Thursday, coffee. Friday, no coffee. And next week, how many people, I don't know, something you do regularly, wash the dishes before you leave the house. Are there the neat freaks? Yeah, okay. So one day a week, one Friday, you don't wash the dishes. And if you're one of those people who never washes the dishes, that's your challenge. Yeah. So Friday you wash the dishes. Right? The purpose of this is the weekly challenges are tied right to your habits. And your habits are the firmest definition of who you are. Marriages break up not because it turns out your husband is a transsexual alien from Mars. It's because he leaves his dirty socks in the living room. Right? What kills relationships is habitual tendencies, not usually the big issues. Right? I've been told that the #1 cause of divorce is how to raise the kids and money. Right? And those are habits of the life. So the weekly habit is something that you don't normally do, one day a week, and every week something different. Does that make sense? Now, if you had a particular hard time with the coffee, you can come back to it in a few months. But don't keep repeating the same thing. We don't want to turn the liberative power of the challenge into a routine. Because as soon as you do that, it's a habit. Which is why Zen masters are always hiding behind things, ready to jump out and smack you. Kind of like, what's his face? Who's the Pink Panther? Peter Sellers and Cato, right? Not now, Cato. And gurus, spiritual teachers are basically Cato. They just jump out at you when you're not looking, and they're irritating and disturbing. But they do bring you into contact quite immediately with what is missed. And that's all a spiritual teacher is really doing, is just kind of putting your attention on what is missed in their own lovely and unfathomable, odd and idiosyncratic ways. So those are called the 3 challenges. Definitely the hardest one's the weekly one. And if you'd like some examples of challenges, you can talk to Zoe here in the front row. She's had years of training in challenges, and I think, Misha, you've done some challenges, right? So, and they're also online, and we told you about that earlier, planetdharma.com, right? Any other question? Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, whatever you're going to call it, that's easy. What's hard is you. I hope that's really clear. The you is the hard bit, because it can never rest. It can never truly rest in its objects, because it knows inherently that those objects are impermanent, out of your control, and subject to decay. So that you can chase it forever, right? Like the greyhound dog that chases the mechanical rabbit. If that greyhound dog ever catches that mechanical rabbit, you'll never get him to run again. If a human chases a mechanical rabbit, all they do is change the paint job and off they go, they're after it again. If you describe yourself as you through all your routines, how would you describe the not self? Well, like I said earlier, I'll start with you, I'll become you. So I will take up your hobbies, your habits, your personality, your characteristics, kind of like theater, right? And in becoming you, this is why I think actors have a real edge, because actors become somebody else while they're doing it. But because they haven't got to the transcendental part, they're kind of a little wobbly, because they don't know who they are. But they're still looking for a me that is. That's the problem. That's the therapeutic problem. So in the process of becoming other people, right, you recognize that who you are is a bit arbitrary. It's made up. It's a story. It's theater. It's a play. And in fact, the Japanese speak that way. Oh, he's playing it being a corporate executive. Oh, he's playing it being dead. Oh, she's playing it being a wife. They recognize that quality, that it's a game. And the difference, by the way, between children and adults is simply that. What children do for play, people call work. Adults call work. And the difference is the insecurities. The kids doesn't have the insecurities about that, so they're playing. The adult has all the insecurities about that, so it's work. So in the process of first being me and being really tight about that, I can't possibly wear a bathing suit through Piccadilly Circus. Why not? So maybe your challenge is to wear a bathing suit Saturday through Piccadilly Circus. You know, and then having done that, all your imaging, all the me things freak out. And having done it, you go, wow, you feel free. Like, yeah, I've stepped out of the box. You know, I'm not me. And in the process of being this weird woman who walked through Piccadilly Circus in her bathing suit, right? You start to get the sense that there's something in between that is not me, not you, not her, not him, not that, not this, and you start to see the space. And that spaciousness, that openness is the not me, and there's nothing we can say about it. Because the minute you say something about it, it's another me, it's another you. So it's the gap. So what's your name, dear?
Tracy.
I'm sorry?
Tracy.
So Tracy, you're you, I'm Doug, right? And if I'm not, if I do something different, then I'm Chief? Keith, sorry, Keith, right? But in the process of making these transitions, I start to see the distance between your nose and my nose and his nose and my nose, and then I start to see the distance between these two noses. That's my freedom. Absolute truth, can't say anything about it. Relative truth, we can talk about it endlessly. Does that answer your question? Sort of? Ego point of view, but it is a process that happens, and basically samadhi, or absorption, or jhana, whatever you want to call it, is just that. You've gone, whether you know it or not, you've gone pre-to, or you've gone gap on you, or both. All right? It's kind of like you're between people. That's samadhi. Between arisings, and I call them objects, but they're mental, emotional, and physical objects. Meaning they have a nodality. They have a something, right? A core, right? And so the pre-to, you're still conscious. You're conscious before you're to. You just aren't self-aware before you're to. In the same way that you're conscious in dream, but you're not self-aware in dream. It's funny that we have no problem falling asleep at night and dying. It's like every night you die, you're gone. Where are you? Gone. And every morning you wake up, I'm back. It's like you just take it for granted, but then you're afraid of death. The only difference between dreaming and death is that when you die, you wake up to a different you.
But you can lucidly dream.
Yes, you can. That's a different story. But for most people. So you shouldn't be afraid of death, because death is just a temporary end to a temporary process, and you are just a temporary process and a temporary changing process, which means not you is also temporary, but since not you doesn't change, it's permanent. But there's nobody there to call it permanent, so it's temporary. And then now we just all jump off a bridge because it's but into the water, you swim away. So the meditative mind is penetrating, if you want to use that word, if it's suffusing, or however gender bias you want to put on it, filling the space of the not you, right? And that can access into not only into other people's karma. You can read the sense of a being, because you're not self-referencing it, but you can also go and travel in time and space if you want to. It's kind of entertaining for a while, but traveling through time and space to other times and other dimensions and other incarnations is pretty much the same as this one, just different clothing. So, in my last lifetime, I was Cleopatra. Okay, so what? Was everybody where was Joe the farmer and Mary the milkmaid? So I was Cleopatra. These are just ego stories, right? So in the old days, it was the previous lifetimes, the gods, right? It was Zeus on the mountain and Thor and all that. Now it's aliens. So we've just replaced the old gods for new gods. Spider-Man and Batman, and these are archetypal stories in the humanities search. And so what a child does is he lives in the archetypes, right? You see kids playing like, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm a Superman. And then as you become responsible for your own economics, you get swallowed up by the me and the habitualization, and you lose your sense of place. So that's another thing you can do to help yourself break free, is go out and play at being somebody tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm going to dress as Angelina Jolie and Laura Croft in the Tomb Raider or something. And of course that's why we have bars and pubs. So we can be goth for a generation, or hippie for a generation. It's just the same story. Hippie, goth, punk. What are we now? Hipster? Is that where we're at? Difficult. And you're only difficult because you cling to you have a fixed view of yourself. Just make that view flexible. Why not live a little? If I see a bunch of you guys on Piccadilly tomorrow in a bathing suit, I'll...
Named it, it had to be something else now.
Well, I'm still going to put you through if you know. So Zoe here asked me in Japan for a challenge, and I said, okay, and Zoe is she's working on her PhD. She's an independent woman, all the right feminist credentials and all that stuff. And I said, okay, we'll go into Hyde Park Corner and get your little box, and stand up and argue that a woman's place is in the home having children, and she shouldn't be in the marketplace. So she took her friend Duncan, Scottish guy, and as she was sitting getting ready to do it, she said, I hate Sensei, that's me. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. But she did it, and while she was doing it, she had all the women were going, you just can't handle the pressure, they were yelling at her and screaming at her, and all the guys were like Arabs, right? They were going, oh yeah, right, lady, go, do you want to get married? And then the feminists, so-called, and the Arab guy, please just make it easy for me and we'll keep the racism out of it. But the Arabs and the feminists started kind of, and started to forget about Zoe. And Zoe, to her great credit, said, hey, this is my soapbox. I'm the one talking. Shut up and listen, right? Which is the second part of her challenge, right? Because she's a bit shy. Used to be. And then she said, okay, I'm out of here. So she picked up her soapbox and she left. And all of them, the feminists, the Arab guys, all kind of went, no, stay, we want more. So she walks off into the sunset of Hyde Park Corner. This is kind of an American image, I guess. With Duncan, and she's, I love Sensei. Sensei's amazing. He's wonderful. He's such an amazing teacher. And of course, what did it have to do with me? Nada. All right, so Lordy. Some of the question is what have been some of my challenges and what are some of the things I've done? Well, 40-day meditation retreats, 3-month meditation retreats in a cabin by myself in the middle of the Canadian outback. Scuba diving was a challenge because I'm a bad swimmer and I'm from Western Canada and the only water is like in the glass you get from the tap, So, that was a bit of a challenge. Living overseas in a culture where I don't speak the language and can't read the writing, and so I'm kind of an independent guy, so that was a challenge. And on that note, in our tradition, the teachers don't charge for what they do. They live by what is called dana. So basically, if this is useful to you, then it's helpful if you support me to do what I do, and if you feel that's worthwhile, I think there's a bowl somewhere. And so living on the kindness of strangers, if you ever watched the movie called Streetcar Named Desire, I rely on the kindness of strangers. That would be you. So that's difficult for me because I'm an independent guy. And because of my role as a teacher, part of my job of helping people with their challenges is to get them to look after me. And, like asking me to say, Misha, would you get me this and do that, when I would much prefer to just get up and do it myself. But it doesn't give him the challenge of taking care of someone else, which makes him an other. Does that make sense? So by asking him to serve me, he's practicing being other than serving himself, if that makes sense, which has always been a religious phenomenon. Right? I think it was Kabir or somebody who sold himself into slavery in order to master the spiritual life, serving someone else. And that's a really big one in this generation, is serving others. So it's become quite a me generation, as it were, starting with mine and going forward, kind of me. So serving others is a challenge, but being served by others is also a challenge because I would rather just do it myself. I know that may sound ridiculous, but it's true. Excuse me, the question is that if you found out that the mechanical rabbit was mechanical, why do humans chase it again and again in a different form? Yeah, that's a very good question. Was it Marshall McLuhan? I'm not sure, who said that the most easy person to bamboozle was the educated person. And the most easy person to fool is the intelligent person, because they're fooled by their own intelligence. So human beings are very clever. We're very smart apes, right? So we basically paint ourselves stories to keep ourselves entertained. So the reason we do it again and again is because of the 4 deep fears are not faced. Anybody want to repeat the 4 deep fears to me? Abandonment, annihilation, insanity, and doing something like being evil. Right? And evil, by the way, is just live spelled backwards. Right? So if you're not living, you're kind of evil. And the devil is just lived spelled backwards. If you haven't lived, you're bedeviled. Huh? And both those words, dev, the root in Sanskrit is dev. It means to shine. So the devil is the shining angel who isn't living, rather than the shining angel who is. Anyway, the reason being of those 4 fears, annihilation, abandonment, whatever, right? We haven't met those fears, so it seems easier to repaint the mechanical rabbit than to meet the fear, because the ego feels that in meeting the fear, it's going to be abandoned, annihilated, go crazy, or do something bad, and we won't. Like I said, it's the weak ego that fights those things and does, clings to things. Like one of the definitions of the hungry ghost realm is unfulfilled desires whose time has passed. So if you think about the young couple who are getting into a relationship that isn't really working because they're terrified of being alone, the unfulfilled desire is not feeling alone, and being alone equals alone. I'm afraid of alone. I get into a relationship. I try to use my partner to feel not alone, but because I'm using my partner to not feel alone, who is alone, I can't not feel alone. So even though I got a partner, I am alone, but I'm still afraid of it. So if I get another guy and put in another girl and put in not alone again, until I come to terms with the fact that aloneness is not emotionally or psychologically scary. Aloneness is the non-self that is spacious, clear, radiant, and blissful. You still get to be with other people, but you just can't. Other people won't satisfy that which is missing. They'll satisfy that which is missing temporarily, but they cannot satiate that feeling of absence, because that feeling of absence is the transcendental. You're all missing. Sorry. I'm speaking a bit glib, right? You're all just missing the transcendental. That's all you're missing. And that's not you, or a non-you. Okay? The non-you and the you are mutually interpenetrating. They're mutually move through each other, but they are in a sense inherently different. Because the you is the object of the mind, right? The sensation, the feeling, the thought. Oh, sorry, did you get the question? The sensation, the thought, the feeling, this is all. The minute it's a thought, the minute it's a sensation, the minute it's a feeling, it's you. The not you is the space. But there would be no thought, no feeling or sensation if there wasn't space, because otherwise it couldn't arise. But that feeling, thought, and space, that feeling, thought, and sensation doesn't touch the space. So in that sense, you don't bring the not you into the you. The best you can say is that in the seeing of the you, the not you is revealed. And in the seeing of the not you, the self emerges, the you emerges. So that's the best I can do with that one right now. And the second part is that yes, it's good to meditate alone, because that helps you come to terms with those 4 root fears. And then it's also good to meditate with others, because when you're meditating with others, you start to pick up the vibrational energies of maybe the beautiful woman catches your attention, or maybe the handsome guy catches your attention, right? And so now you have to process information with other that you don't process alone. In other words, the relationship aspect. So the major path for the solitary meditator coming to terms with self is solitary meditation. The meditation for working with others and being with others in community is called karma yoga, right? And you do it through the operation of the community, right? To learn how to do the issues with each other and still keep the you integritus. Is that a word? And also positive, wholesome relationships with the other not you. And to do that, that practice is called karma yoga. You do it in community, and you do it through your work, and you learn how to be not you, you, not you, not you in that circumstance. Does that help? Well, the transcendental is always silent, and the you is always noisy. So the relationship again is that space, non-space. Objects are noisy, space is silent. So inside you, there's a place that is absolutely silent, right? And then inside you, there's a whole lot of noise going on. And that's fantastic, enjoy it. But the noise only makes sense because there's space, right? Think about music. I'll just end on this note. Music only makes sense because of the silence. The distance between the notes. Otherwise it would just be noise. And insofar as your ego is troubled, yourself, your identity is troubled by things, is because all you're hearing is noise pounding against noise, pounding against noise. There's no space between the notes. So all spiritual teaching is doing, whatever religion, right? It's just telling, be aware of the space. So bishops and priests will argue and fight, but saints never argue. Saints never argue with other saints. It's just, there's no, how can you argue about silence?